FEMA is sabotaging lines of communication so their activities cannot be exposed to the wider relief authorities in the media. Commenting on the sabotage by FEMA of communications lines, Washington insider Wayne Madison, former NSA employee, by the way, says jamming and other communications, such as television signals, is part of a Pentagon tactic called information blockade or technology blockade. The tactic is one of a number of such operations that are part of the doctrine of information warfare, or InfoWars, and is one of the psychological operations or PSYOPs methods used by the U.S. Special Forces Command. Radio host Carol Baker, who has been tracking the FEMA sabotage, stated that Ploughmane's Parish Sheriff Jeff Hingle, and we've talked to their office, this was on CNN, had his deputies patrol the county line under orders not to let FEMA in because they were caught sabotaging communications. Folks, these people are incredible. And again, they don't tell the cops, hey, you can't have communications. They come cut the lines. As is discussed in the Meet the Press interview, Jefferson Parish Sheriff Harry Lee also has armed guards patrolling the county line in order to prevent FEMA sabotage. Because, see, FEMA can't have the locals do a good job dealing with this. They've got to have total failure. FEMA has a number of executive orders that outline the total takeover of any U.S. city. For a full synopsis of FEMA's executive orders in light of the hurricane, click here. And then you get this article. And it's all hyperlinks. Every statement we make is backed up. So if you want to read this article, it's embodied in that one. FEMA is clearly using the human catastrophe as a means of executing its decade-long plans and providing the pretext for future takeover scenarios of all major American cities. Amongst a litany of government inaction and outright dereliction, this is the most alarming evidence to emerge yet that clearly indicates an agenda for the federal government to profit and expand its power from exploiting the aftermath of the hurricane. We will continue to track this story as it develops. That's by Paul Joseph Watson and Alex Jones. Another article by Steve Watson and Alex Jones, former Assistant Secretary of the Treasury on New Orleans. Americans are being brainwashed. Mentality is like that of the brown shirts that followed Hitler. And that's Paul Craig Roberts, pretty much the father of Reaganomics. I mean, you don't get much more conservative than that. Well, he was the father of the tax cuts, not of the spending increases. He wrote the policy for Treasury, number 2 at Treasury. And he was on my show going, they may take over completely. It may be, 1776. We may have to fight like the Iraqi insurgency. This is a guy who's gotten all the big conservative awards, but he's not a sellout. He's telling it like it is. Now, let's start from the beginning and then briefly give you a synopsis on what's led us up to this. Last Monday, last Tuesday, last Wednesday, last Thursday, I wouldn't say the government was behind this. I wouldn't say they were doing it. I said I've got to look at it and study it. They may just be inept. The government is inept in many cases. It can't protect you. It can't take care of you. But in certain areas, it's very predatory and very precision-oriented. And then the rest of it is all basically blubbery and compartmentalized, and that's done on purpose. It's part of the management system. But now it's overwhelming. It's clear. It's conclusive. There's no debating it. The evidence predominantly shows that the government, elements of the government, blew up some of the levees. We know they've been stopping Army Corps of Engineers and others from fixing levees, that they've been shot at by the U.S. government, by the military. And then when that comes out, they claim it was insurgents. The Army Times is calling the people in New Orleans insurgents and calling it combat operations. So this is also a giant training drill in the real world. The Pentagon said Desert Storm 1 in 91 was a drill. I mean, they even consider wars. They even call Afghanistan a laboratory. This kind of follows medical doctrine. A brain surgeon practices. That's why it's called their practice. A dentist practices on you, and then they get better. Well, this is all a part of a practice. This is all official. But so clearly some elements blew up these dikes. Then we fall back on the second argument, which we also know to be factual. The number one threat, the most likely mass disaster that FEMA's own statisticians, who are compartmentalized, who aren't bad, they come up with the number one threat, hand it off to the people that are going to carry out the event. Number one threat, third most dangerous disaster we could possibly have, but number one threat, most likely to happen, third worst disaster that could possibly take place if it did happen, would be a Category 4 hurricane hitting New Orleans. It's 20 feet below sea level. They knew it would totally flood if this happened. Bill Clinton cuts the funding. Bush cuts the funding down to almost nothing, directly for war funding in Iraq. Then he lies and says that it isn't being spent on Iraq when the Times-Picayune, even Popular Science, and a dozen other plus publications, 9 articles in Times-Picayune last year alone, said they've cut the funding down to nothing. They're not even fixing anything. The feds, though, were doing key repairs on the main 17th Street levee that broke. And witnesses have said there was an explosion. Just like the Pentagon got hit in the one spot where they were doing repairs. So, but what we know is this. The government wouldn't let food, wouldn't let water in when it was a piece of cake to bring it in. They told people before the storm hit, the welfare folks that couldn't leave the city, that didn't have, new SUVs, they told them, go to the Superdome. They went there, and the police were all pulled out by FEMA. FEMA, they can't blame it on the locals. New Orleans voluntarily became the first federal city since the Civil War and Reconstruction in 2002. They went totally federalized. I did a big piece on it in my film Police State 3 2 years ago. My Police State 3 film talks about it. All the emergency management, all the flood relief was federalized. Then they lowered the guard. Then once the crisis began, this is all admitted, police would try to bring in food and water. They said no, they get nothing. Knowing they'd studied all this in a dozen, 2 dozen, 3 dozen other countries. They knew what would happen. It broke down. Then you did get some rioting and looting. Cops were even breaking in stores to get stuff. And the country sees this, and man, we need martial law. We need to give FEMA unlimited power. FEMA already has unlimited power, folks. FEMA already runs the whole country. It's the national security dictatorship. It's under the NSA. It's under continuity of government. It's under John Negroponte, the head of death squads, our new supreme commander of all intelligence. This is the takeover. And so even if Bush, the puppet, gets in trouble for, quote, having a bad response, well, we're going to have a new commission like we had on 9/11 by a bunch of cronies who will call for more police state, more funding. The commission will go, you screwed up, government, but that's okay. We'll have FEMA federalize every city, and this won't happen again. When FEMA had already started federalizing cities. So see, the bigger the war on drugs gets, the more drugs we have. The bigger the war on terror gets, the more terror we have. The bigger the war on poverty gets, the more poverty we have. The bigger the war on disasters gets. Notice all the talk of martial law and how it's good and how it's great and how we need it in the last few months leading up to this. They set the table in front of you. They prepare you. They bathe you in this. Now, folks, here I got a bunch of clips. I have the police who aren't looting to supply themselves, but actually filling their carts full of stereo equipment and tennis shoes and jewelry at Walmart. So my point is, the government can't protect you and won't protect you and never will protect you. You need to get self-sufficient and get prepared. I am, you should be. It's not kooky and bad to be prepared. Our forefathers weren't fearful people, but they were all prepared. They were outgoing, robust, strong people, but they were all prepared. You're not prepared. I can skin a buck, I can run a trot line. I'd like to spit some beech nut in that dude's eye. I can take care of myself. I can take care of my family. Nothing compared to my father. Nothing compared to his father. Nothing compared to his father. And the men going back to Virginia in the 1750s, teaching their sons how to shoot a long rifle. I'm a shadow of those men, but you are a shadow of me.